Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. And what you're about to see is a pre-recorded training session we did over in the United States. But be assured that a lot of the material that we cover is really applicable to any automotive application. So just be aware that yes, it is a lot of North American vehicles, but they will apply a lot of the same principles apply over in the UK as well. Now, if you do have any questions, if you're watching this during the premiere, you can just leave it in the chat. We'll be monitoring live chat. If you're watching this after the premiere, then just feel free to leave a comment underneath the video and we'll get to those as we can as well. So my name is Jason Gabrenas. I'm one of Snap-on's diagnostic technical trainers. I've been in the training department since 2013, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on, so I had 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so I worked in a dealership, and over time, I guess, just became the default diag guy in the shops. I always ended up having the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bed. Then before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. Our topic today is Reveal the Unseen, Thermal Imaging Diagnostics. We're going to talk about the magic of using heat energy, thermal energy, in order to see things that are problems with cars that we might not normally be able to see with our own two eyes. Now, if you watched a few of my videos, you'll know I like to talk about workflow, having a good repeatable workflow in order to not miss anything. I don't want to miss any steps. I want to make sure I get everything covered. I want to make sure I get the repair done right the first time. So anywhere from pre-scan through diagnosis through the post-scan at the end. But really, before we even get that far, we have other steps that we need to take as well. All the way from taking in the customer. As soon as the customer arrives, you need to capture that customer complaint and see what's going on with their vehicle. Why are they here? Is it an overheating problem? Is it a noise? Is it an electrical problem? What does it happen to be? And then, of course, road test the vehicle to try and verify, and then inspect the vehicle to see if we see any other issues, or maybe we even find what the problem is right then and there before we even get to a diagnosis. So when we're talking about thermal imaging as a tool, it would usually fall into the inspection category and then also in the diagnosis category as well. Maybe a little bit in the after repair just to kind of verify that you fix the problem and the problem's not there anymore, but mainly inspection and diagnosis. I also want to make note that thermal imagers work on a temperature differential, right? So it's not hot to cold, so to say. It's relative to what's going on in the scene on the screen. So example, on the left-hand side, we see the hottest thing, relatively speaking, of course. The hottest thing on the screen is going to be 175 degrees. That's going to be that white spot. Then the coldest thing is going to be 75 degrees, black. So it's not like 0 to 500. It is a 100-degree difference between top to bottom. But we'll also notice on the right, the hottest thing on this screen is 83.6 degrees, probably right around there. And then the coldest thing is 72.5 degrees, like right next to it. So that's only an 11-degree difference, 11.1 degrees. So it's not necessarily that the highest part is hot and the lowest part is cold. It's just here, what's in this screen, what's on the scene as to relative to each other is one hot and one cold, or cooler or warmer as it goes. And it does help us to reveal that unseen, as the title of this class says. So here's an example motorcycle, right? So we have some pipes on a motorcycle. You see they're double walled, double insulated pipes here, and super hot coming out, 770 degrees right at the head. But then down here, we're in the cooler range, in the purples and the pinks. So that could be maybe 100, 200 degrees down in there, and then 59 degrees around the rest of the area. So it is relative to what's going on the screen, and then of course we can also see it. You wouldn't be able to see that or necessarily even know if it was that much cooler in the pipe. Same thing with the seat heater. You see it's 17 degrees outside, ambient or whatever the coldest temperature is, 17 degrees, the metal pieces. And then the warmest is 69. Right, so we can see that. We can see the warm grid in here for the seat heater on this. So interesting case study brought to us by one of our diagnostic reps, Nathan Hirschbach. He's down in Texas. And he had this case study he actually sent me on his own truck. So he has a 2014 Ram 2500 with the Cummins. And has, so as you can see, 371,000 miles on it. It's been a road horse. But he was noticing as he was driving that his transmission temperature was a lot higher than probably what it should be. It got coolant temp of 186, oil temp of 194, but the trans temp is 215. So that's a bit hotter than I would think it should be. And I'd say hotter than we'd like it. We need to be able to keep that, roundabout probably the coolant temp, considering we have a transmission cooler in the front of the truck, in front of the radiator. So you can see the big thing there is the radiator, and then we have this transmission oil cooler that mounts to the front right there, and then we got a couple lines that go back. Also in those lines, however, we have this little check valve of sorts, and also inside it has a little thermostat. So where could my problem be? I suppose I could have a clogged core here inside the cooler. Definitely could have a clog in there. One of the lines could be messed up. Maybe the fluid's a little low. Could be, I suppose. That might heat it up. But he started looking around and come to find out, he gets down to where that little block is, that little measuring block, and we can see quite warm, 237 degrees there, 215 degrees right there, and it's not really even, not really flowing through. It's just kind of getting there and staying. So what happens on these is there inside this block, there's also this little thermostat. So based on temperature, it can open and close this little valve and allows it to flow through. It is serviceable as well. It's got a little C-clip that goes on the end, and all this stuff kind of gets pushed inside there, and it can open and close, and you can change it if you need to. In his case, it was clogged. So we kind of took it all apart, cleaned it up real good, put it back together, and it was flowing normally after the fact. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little case study there that he brought to me. He actually he does a lot of work with thermal imagers, so we're going to see a few more of his pictures throughout this presentation as well. As a matter of fact, the next one. So we're on electrical diagnosis, which would be probably the most likely thing your mind might jump to when you think, oh, I'll use a thermal imager. And when we first were selling these, that was the big thing that we hit on. You can see the thermal energy from high resistance somewhere. So in this example, we have high resistance in a battery terminal. As you can see, you can make out on this picture that is not necessarily a factory battery terminal. That is more of those aftermarket types with the two bolts that go down and clamp the wire in place. You can see that's rather warm, 109 degrees in the middle, 118 degrees at the hottest there. That's pretty warm considering it's like 75 degrees outside, ambient temperature. So that is resistance, and that resistance is giving us quite a bit of temperature, and that's how you're able to see these electrical problems. Now, what it turned out to be on this vehicle was, customer replaced it or whatever, part store part maybe, I'm not sure, but it was a no start. It was having starting problems, and the reason being, they did a voltage drop from the battery terminal to the, maybe over here, or maybe they went all the way back to the starter, I'm not sure. But the voltage drop from the battery to where they measured it was 3 volts. And if you measured the battery directly, it was like 12.5, where it normally would be. So that 3-volt drop gets us down to 9 volts. That makes it very difficult to start a car. I'm sure you probably could some days, but it's very difficult to start a car with that much of a voltage drop. So that much resistance was dropping that much voltage, causing the vehicle not to start. And you can see it plain as day with the thermal image. Here we go, the high resistance connector. Same deal. So maybe you got a little bit of the green fuzzy stuff inside the connector, and it's corroded or what have you, and it's not getting it past. So we can see very, very warm, 175 degrees versus 83 degrees is the highest. It's probably more like 78, 80 degrees where that connector after it was fixed. High resistance wire in a harness. We can see it's not necessarily a thick harness, but we see there's a wire in there. As you can see that heat is very, very thin. So that is a high resistance wire, high heat going on in that wire. 79 degrees right there. 157 degrees, not that far away. That looks like probably where about the connector would be, the connector end of it. So it's going to be a little bit warmer there. So yeah, high resistance turns voltage into heat. So we can see the current trying to flow through there. The current will increase, the heat increases. Versus the good one where we really don't see that hot. How do I find a draw? Maybe a relay is stuck on, right? So when a relay is on, obviously it is going to generate heat because of the coil in there and the current flowing through it. So, 150 degrees in the middle of that relay, it's definitely warm, it's definitely on. So that's a relay stuck on. So a couple electrical problems you could find. Next one's tires and brakes. This one you might not necessarily think quickly. You might not think to go to this, but how do I check out my tires? How do I check out my brakes using heat, using thermal imaging? So here's a vehicle and alignment issue. You can see it's hotter on the outside of the tire than it is on the inside of the tire. So it's obviously wearing more friction on that outside part versus a good tire, which is fairly even in the middle there. So if it's going one way or the other, you drive the car down the road and then you see, okay, where is the heat with that? Can also diagnose overinflation. So if it's overinflated, the center of the tire will be sticking out a little bit further than the outer sides of the tire. So that creates more friction in that center part of the tire and creates more heat. And there we go, overinflated tire. Can also go the other way around, underinflated tire. You might not even necessarily be able to see it visually, but underinflated tire, it's going to be riding more on the edges and less in the middle. So you'll see that with the friction on the outside. You can see how it's a little bit cooler on the inside. And it's not a lot. It's not a lot cooler, but it's enough where you can see the outsides are definitely wearing more than the inside. So that's an underinflated situation. This one's one of my favorites. I always have to keep this in here just because of how many times I had to try and figure out a pinhole leak in a tire. Back in my technician days at the dealership, that's a nightmare. But put air in there, and when the air escapes, instead of spraying the soapy water or putting it in the bath, you can just point it at the tire and see the cooler air will be spraying out because the high pressure, high speed air will be cooler and you'll be able to see it. How about this one's a quick little video. So this is a truck with a stuck caliper bolt. And we got to watch the temperatures here. So on the right hand side, you got 120 degrees at the hottest on that one side. And if we go to the other side, you got 340 degrees on the other side. So the wheels don't necessarily translate to the heat difference, even though it is quite a bit hotter. But definitely the overall heat of the rotor in the seam, you can see it goes, it's like 300 degrees, 340 degrees on that side. So that's a stuck caliper. This was one on my car. So I just did my brakes, my rear brakes on my car maybe 6 months or less ago. Pretty sure it was less than 6 months. So I did it in the spring. And I got a chatter, shimmy. Not in the front. Doesn't do anything to steering wheel. So we know if we had a warp rotor in the front, it would already jerk the steering wheel out of my hands. But in the back, it gives you that bump in the seat. And you can kind of feel it in the pedal a little bit too. So I know I got at least one warp rotor, if not both. So I wanted to see, because I'm like, I know you should be able to see that because it's going to be more friction on one part of the rotor than the other as it's warped. So it's going to be kind of gripping the pads a little more on one spot. And sure enough, it's not a huge temperature difference. But you see right here, that part of the rotor, 111 degrees Fahrenheit, go down one spoke on the wheel, you get 152 degrees Fahrenheit down the other side. So it's a 40-degree difference from two different parts of the rotor. So that's definitely showing me that warpage there. So I thought that was kind of neat, little way we can do that. Now let's talk about drivability. Maybe you might think about drivability when it comes to thermal. Sure. There's a couple really easy things to see, and it's going to be things like which cylinder is misfiring. Pretty easy to see, right? It's the one that's cool. That one right there. It's obviously not firing because we don't have the hot exhaust gases flowing through that one. Maybe it's firing a little, but it's not firing as much as the other ones, 300 something degrees. This is probably down to the 180, 200 degrees. So that's not working, and obviously that one is. They're all nice and hot. And then you might think, well, why is it misfiring? Well, if you look, there's inline here, and we have the coil, and this one coil. All these other coils are generating heat because when a coil generates electricity, ramps up that energy, it's obviously going to generate some heat. So the one that's not throwing heat, that's the one that's not working. We can see down here it is a little warmer, and that's probably the spark plug hole. You know, the block and such kind of warming it up a little bit more. But that top of that coil is definitely not doing anything. Or how about this for a drivability problem? So this is another story from Nathan. He was in a shop one day showing, carrying the thermal imager around, and they had a customer there that was, they had a drivability problem on their car, and the tech surmised that it was a clogged muffler, and didn't really have any way to prove it unless they took it apart. And the customer didn't want to because they didn't really believe them for whatever reason, as customers do. So Nathan just kind of went up under the car, took a quick shot, took a shot. And we can see it's like 400 degrees going into the muffler and like 190 degrees in the muffler, and then much cooler going out. So he brought the picture, brought it over to the customer and said, all right, so you see all that hot exhaust gas is going in. It's not making it out. It's clogged. That means the engine can't breathe. That's why you're having a driving problem. It's like, oh, the customer said, oh, that makes sense. All right, yeah, sure. Let's do the work. Picture tells 1,000 words, right? Picture just makes it so much easier to understand what's going on, especially if you're a customer, right? Customer needs to visually tell and understand what's going on. Cooling system, that might come to mind when you think about thermal imaging, but a couple examples here. So a bad heater valve wasn't letting the coolant go through the heater hose right there, versus one that is working, goes like that. Also looks like it's pretty cool. Relatively speaking, of course, 93 degrees, right? But in that little spot right there, and you don't see that over here. So that could be part of it too, not visually being able to see it without the camera. You could. Radiator, that one's pretty straightforward, right? Is it flowing or is it not? If it's flowing, then we see nice even flow through the radiator, nice and warm. It's 88 degrees or so. And on this side, we have bad is obviously not flowing at all on this left-hand side of that radiator whatsoever. It's nice and warm on one side, pretty cool on the other side. Thermostat, same deal. So we have the thermostat housing here, and we can see it's nice and hot. But the thermostat either is not working, depends on the temperature, I guess, right? 153 degrees, maybe it hasn't opened yet. But we can see that, and then nothing going into the hose. On the right-hand side, we have the thermostat housing is hot, 165 degrees. Maybe that's where it opened. And then you can see it going through the hose there as well. This one I thought was really cool. It's another one from Nathan. Blown head gasket. So this was a coolant container, as far as I was told. Maybe one of the golf balls or something, the big soccer ball looking things. And they couldn't really tell. They were trying to diagnose whether or not it did have a blown head gasket or not. And he said, it's too bad we couldn't have taken the video because this is on the original one, not the Elite that takes the video. But if you could have taken a video, you would have been able to see that too, which I think is pretty cool. But all these little white marks, these swirlies here, this white swirlies, he said you could see it kind of swirling around in there, kind of like a mist, but you couldn't visually see it, just coolant. And the coolant would be the same temperature throughout, pretty much. So the hydrocarbons that are inside that coolant, you said you could see them swirling around. I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool right there. How many head gaskets we had to diagnose and do at Subaru? I'll tell you, that'd save some time. How about some other things? Here's another one from Nathan. So he had he bought a used truck, and be going down the road, and every time it get hit with a high wind from the side, like maybe a crosswind or something, so it'd make this strange howling noise, and he couldn't figure out what it was and where it came from. So we finally said, all right, thought about it a little bit, said, okay, I'll close the doors, turn the heater on full blast. You can see it's like 30 degrees outside, 36 degrees. So you turn the heater on full blast, and you say, well, if the air can get in, the air can get out. So 56 degrees with that heater on full blast blowing out of the seal by the door hand. And then he took it apart and took a better look at it, and sure enough, no seal around that door hand. So it was disassembled for one reason or another, and they didn't put that seal in. So totally. And then lastly, or at least the last image I'm going to show you right now, at home. You have this USB charger plug thing, and he heard a noise, kind of like a buzzing noise or whatever. Couldn't really figure out where it was, so he started getting closer. He was investigating with the thermal. Got up to this, and come to find out, this one USB port that was not currently in use was warm, 96 degrees or so. So that was definitely heating up. That could have melted. That could have caused a fire. So that is, what's it worth to you? What's it worth to you? If I didn't have a thermal imager, I might not have been able to find that. Might have caused some issues there down the road. So definitely a good thing he was checking with that. So out of for Snap-on's involvement anyways, we have the original diagnostic thermal imager. We have the diagnostic thermal imager elite, which we're going to talk through a few of the functions on that here in a minute. And then we also have the diagnostic thermal laser, which kind of a half and half thermal and laser gun. All right, laser gun, same type of thing, right? And then also it will save, at least the elite will. The elite will save the 3 different images to the tool and also uploads those 3 images to the cloud. So this is my brake rotor again. So you can see we got thermal with the numbers, thermal without the numbers, and then just a plain picture from the tool because it also has a camera, video camera. So as I said, the Thermal Imager Elite does have Snap-on Cloud upload capability. So you can actually go out, share things with your customers. Like we said earlier, pictures worth 1,000 words, pictures worth $1,000 sometimes, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't normally do, but in this case, there's really no way of getting that on the screen other than shooting a camera. Right? So we got a little camera here on my desk, and I got the Thermal Imager Elite right there. Now, of course, it's just pointed at the desk, so you're not hardly gonna see anything other than the wood that's on my desk. You can see this number on the top left is going to be where that pinpoint is. So it's 87 degrees, 88 degrees. Yeah, it's kind of warm in here. Actually, I have a audio mixer underneath here that puts off a decent amount of heat. So that's probably where it's going. You can see 75% battery. Wi-Fi is working. There's my Wi-Fi indicator. We have zoom and we have opacity. We'll talk more about those in a little bit. And then, of course, we have our temperature range here. Yeah, you see like 3 degrees from coldest to hottest, 3 degrees. So if I go to the menu, first thing that's going to come up, we see on the top left, we get this little eye, and that is going to be your troubleshooter. So it's got a list of known goods and known bads. So let's go to maybe like body and electrical. Here's one I haven't done yet. How about like the rear window defroster, right? I go into the froster and you can see, press the up and down arrows to see the good and the bad. So there's the good one. And then it's going to tell me key on engine running, command the rear window defroster on, use diagnostic thermal imager to expect. And then here's the bad one right there. You can see a whole piece of the grid is missing. So that's a pretty popular one too, because it's very easy to see. Pretty plain as day where there's a missing piece of the grid, right? And then it just cycles back to known good, known bad. Back up. See things like heated mirrors, window motor. How about a window motor? There's a good one. There's a bad one. So it's quite a bit hotter over there than it is on this one. So we know it's working. So that's a troubleshooter. There's also I got to go back up one menu. There's also a built-in demonstration mode in here. So you can see a few of the different things you might be able to see. So there's an example, known good AC condenser. That's just a short little video. Motorcycle heated seats, going to give you a little story about that and then go and show you that. There's heated seats again. Motorcycle exhaust leak. There's an exhaust leak right there between those 2 pipes. Yep, known bad there. Wheel bearing. See as it's rolling along. See it's warm. And then back to the AC condenser. So there's a little demo in there. All right, so that's troubleshooter. Then if we go to the right, we get our grid. So the grid's going to be everything that's saved on the tool. Now, I'm not 100% sure of everything we got on here. Let's see. Those are movies. Yeah, here's an example of a movie. That's my cat on the counter. So you can see cat looking at a pizza box, and there's its head right there. So there's your little movie. Can also go down to like images. So there's an image of climate control, HVAC. You can see it's cooler on that side than it's at 37 degrees. It's pretty good. Inside the vent, 94 degrees in the car. So you can just kind of see what's going on there. 39 degrees right at that little spot. Also note in here, you see it's got a check mark right there. So that's for the Snap-on Cloud. That indicates that it has been uploaded to the cloud, and it's there. So a little check mark. It'll show a cloud before it uploads, and then after it has a check mark once it is up. Next one's a trash can. So I'll just highlight whichever one I want, hit yes, and then it'll go. If I go over to the right-hand side, that'll give me my settings. So things like the Wi-Fi connection, you would want to set that up first, because as I said, it uploads to Wi-Fi or uploads using Wi-Fi to Snap-on Cloud. This is actually the first tool that was capable of uploading to the Snap-on Cloud at the time. We have setup instructions. So once you do get your Wi-Fi set up, you need to go in here. You need to enter these numbers on your Snap-on account to link the tool. Date and time, color palette. This one's interesting. So it defaults to this iron, and that's the color that we always see. But you can also do rainbow. You can do gray to iron. You can also do cool to hot. Cool to hot's interesting because that'll show you the coolest and the hottest thing in the scene, and everything else will be different shades of gray. So if I want to see the absolute coldest and absolute hottest thing in that area, that's a good one to use for that. Let's see, brightness changes the brightness of the screen. That'll change the focus of my camera, so I'm not going to change that. Language, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different languages you can set it to, so it's a global tool. Not a lot of stuff in, not all words on it anyways, if you know what I mean. So it's mostly in the troubleshooters where the words are. So automatic shutdown tells you you can set it to how long it takes before it automatically shuts off to save the battery. Some navigation tips, spotlight intensity. So there is a spotlight on the tool because it's got a video camera and a regular camera. So if I'm under the hood or I'm underneath the vehicle, it has a little spotlight for it. Got a utility to calibrate it. And then in advanced, we have a few other things. Temperature, it's going to change from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Emissivity. So emissivity is a measure of how much a material emits thermal radiation or thermal energy. So it defaults to plastic, rubber, painted metal, because that's usually what you're going to be around on a car for the majority of your time. But strong oxidized iron and steel, leather, mild oxidized iron and steel, polished cast iron and steel, polished aluminum and chrome. You can set up different emissivity levels. Object distance, is it near or far? Wi-Fi status is going to be just kind of check your Wi-Fi. Micro SD card check if you have a problem with that micro SD card, and about. So a lot of good stuff in there. And then if we go to the up, down, and left and right arrows, if we go up and down, that's going to change my opacity. So you see over here, how much thermal do I see versus the actual camera? So 40%, 20%, none, right? So that'd just be straight camera. I think I might be able to lift it up. Let's see. Not really. Can't see it really well. Now I'm on the wrong. Almost. So that's your opacity is up and down. And then left to right is going to be my different viewing modes. So this is picture in picture. So it's thermal in the middle, camera on the outside. I got side by side. So camera on this side, thermal on this side. We're going to have 1x zoom, 2x zoom, and 3x. Just going to zoom in like that. So that's all the stuff on the tooling. Now real quick, open a new window here. Go to Alt Describe. All right, so you can see all the vehicle system reports, the pictures and things that I've uploaded. But here is the one from my car, right? So the rotor. So this one in the middle is going to be with all the fixings on it. If I go to the right, it gives me just the plain thermal. If I go to the left, it gives me just the plain camera. So I can choose which image I want to share with my customer. I can also tag it, save it. So that one is tagged. So if I go all the way back up to the top and I do brakes, I tagged it with brakes. So now I can find anything with brakes. So all I got to do is come down here at the bottom and just type in some words. So we got wheel, we got brakes, whatever else you want to put in there. Also thermal, you could search, gives you all your thermal camera pictures, pardon me. All right, so that's all my thermal pictures that are up there. A lot of cats and dogs up there, but having that up there, having that available, you can share it with your customers. I also have it down here in my shop files too. So shop files, the nice thing about that is if it ever gets deleted, you won't lose it. So you can send it via text message, email, or copy the link to the clipboard and then share it that way. All right, so that is thermal. And with that, that is our time here today. So make sure you tune in for new diagnostic content every week. We will be premiering a new video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. UK time. So make sure you check it out on the YouTube channel. If you're watching, well, of course, you would be watching this on YouTube, but make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, ring the little notification bell so you know anytime we post new content. And it's youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnosticsUK. With that, time for questions. If you have any questions, just feel free. Once again, if you're watching this on a premiere, just leave it in the live chat and we'll answer those. Otherwise, leave a comment under the video and we will get to those as we monitor those comments as well. So I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learning a little bit more about how you might be able to be more efficient at diagnosing vehicles using some of the information that we've given you today. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Hopefully you can watch and see you on any of our other videos. Have a good week. Have a good night and take care.